And I just want to welcome you guys. Thanks for joining us for this lecture tonight. We're very, very excited to have Terry with us. And I am Davana Robity. I'm the program director at the Schweinfurth Art Center. And we're really excited about the Juneteenth celebration this year, particularly because it's now a national holiday, and we're really glad that it's getting the recognition it deserves. And we have a lot of Juneteenth programs that are coming up tomorrow as well, including some storytelling for children and teens. And in fact, the teen one is really for like teens and adults. You guys can find out all about that on our website, and it's by a performance. She's a storyteller and performer named Vanessa Johnson. She's fabulous. I highly recommend you guys check that out, or if you know any children who could be interested in that. And we also have another lecture tomorrow at 6 as well, Sarah Bond, and it is a lecture about her quilt making heritage and the sort of legacy that she has that kind of goes back for many generations. And I would also like to say that tomorrow is a really great time to get out and visit Auburn. Take a little day trip out here if you're in the area, because there's lots going on, including, you know, Terry's exhibit, all of the exhibits at the Schweinfurth. And we are selling a joint admission ticket for $12, where you get all of the exhibits at the Schweinfurth and all of the exhibits at the Cayuga Museum, which includes a tour of the case lab and the other part of Terry's exhibit. And there's lots going on at the Equal Rights Heritage Center. They're going to be having a market in the morning. And I also want to talk about our, we have another project called the Community Flag Project, where we're giving out flags for people to create. And the content on the flags should be about celebrating the contributions of people of color in our community and nationally. Those flags are being given out at the Equal Rights Heritage Center and the Schweinfurth. They can be returned at the end of the month, and then they will be on exhibit in our fall exhibit. So, you know, check all of that stuff out on our website. I want to sort of turn it over to Kirsten Gosh, so she can tell you a little bit about what's going on at the Cayuga, and then we'll get started with Terry's lecture.
Sure. Thanks, Savannah. So just a quick introduction. My name is Kirsten. I'm the executive director of the Cayuga Museum of History and Art, which is conveniently located right next door to the Schweinfurth. The reason that I'm here as a partner tonight is because Terry's show is actually on display jointly at both of our museums. This is the first time that we've ever done a joint exhibit like this before, and it's really, really great. I think it's working out really well. I love how it's staged in both spaces. So as she said, tomorrow is a great day to come check it out. When you visit us, we also have an exhibit right now exploring the concept of flashbulb memories. And like she said, we also have a secondary museum on our property called the Case Research Lab, which is actually the birthplace of talking movies. It's a historic site where sound film was developed in the 1920s. So there's a lot to see when you come to Auburn. So we look forward to seeing you. So.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsten. And I'm glad she brought that up. Terry was selected as a part of the Emerging Artists program that we were working on jointly back in 2019. We've delayed this exhibit for quite a while, but we're so excited to have Terry. We were very impressed with her proposal, and it has exceeded our expectations. And so there is another project coming up in the fall that was also part of that series, which will also be held jointly. And we're just really excited to have Terry. I want to let you guys know how this is going to go. We're going to have a lecture for about an hour, close to that. Then we'll open it up for questions. But if you have a question while you're listening, you can type it in the chat, and I can kind of go through and select some of those to ask Terry at the end. But without further ado, I'd really like to go ahead and give it over to Terry.
Thank you, Davana. You have been a wonderful coach for all things Zoom. And if I was a good student, we did it, right?
Yeah.
All good? Okay. Well, needless to say, thank you. I was nervous, but seeing everybody and the kind faces and conversation, I'm quite relaxed right now. And wanting obviously to thank Devana and Kirsten, everybody at Schweinfurth and the Cayuga Museum. They're wonderful people to work with. And for those of you who don't know Auburn, it's a great small town in upstate New York. I was pleased to be one of two people selected for the show, which ultimately I called Harriet's Legacy. The idea was to link the life and heritage of Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad to people who came after her by using my family as a reference point and working from family photos and imagining the landscapes in which the people seeking freedom lived. I'll talk more about that in a minute. I just needed to mention that it's a great good fortune that we are starting on the eve of the first federal holiday for Juneteenth. This is a book that Annette Gordon-Reed just wrote, and she grew up in Texas. She's a wonderful historian if you don't know her, and a gift to all of us. And I haven't read it yet because it really just came out. But I wanted to start by noting that many of the tributes I've heard today, celebrations of Juneteenth, I haven't heard enough people tell the full story of why Juneteenth happened, why people were so late learning that they had been freed. And I would encourage everybody, in addition to serving and celebrating and honoring tomorrow, to start a habit of just getting a book and going to sit by the lake or on your porch. I think one of the best things we can do in this country is to correct and complete the quite incorrect and incomplete history that we were all taught in school. This is one of many pictures of Harriet Tubman, who was born Araminta Ross and called Minty. She was enslaved in March 1822 in Dorchester County, Maryland, south of the Mason-Dixon line. Harriet Tubman died on March 10th, 1913 in Auburn. Auburn is quite proud of its local and regional history around Harriet Tubman and Seward and the suffragettes and suffragists as well. This is one of the paintings in the exhibit. So she died on March 10th, 1913. This is a black and white image of a painting I did of my mother, Florence Green, who was later Florence Plater. I'm paying attention to people's names for a reason. She was born in May 1913. So she was born in the same year that Harriet Tubman died. And she was born and raised under segregation, legal segregation, thank you, Woodrow Wilson, in Washington, D.C. So just after this project got started, the film Harriet came out, and it was while watching the film Harriet and also looking through family photos such as this, that I realized how close my family history was to the history of the Underground Railroad. These are my parents' wedding reception, and this is my grandmother. You'll see again my maternal grandmother. By my calculation, she would have been born to enslaved parents. I hope my sister will correct me. I'm pretty sure in saying that I only have to go back 3 generations to find a family member, a great grandmother who would have been born into slavery during the time of the Underground Railroad. This is a plaque from Ithaca, around the corner from me, the corner of Albany and State, just acknowledging how much Underground Railroad activity happened right here in Ithaca. This is commemorating a building that housed people seeking freedom that's no longer existing, but it's commemorated by the county. So in the exhibit, my goal was to link Harriet Tubman and her generation to our generation in 2 ways, by looking at people and by looking at places. And frankly, it was a perfect opportunity for me not to have to decide whether I wanted to paint figure and portrait or paint landscape. half the people know me say I should do one, and half the people who know me say I should do the other. So by virtue of being asked to do work in 2 museums and give a rationale for it, I decided to show figure and portrait paintings at the Cayuga Museum, which itself is an old mansion, an old home, and to show what I thought were going to be imagined landscapes at the Schweinfurth Museum next door in the Julius Gallery. So I started sketching early on. I started sketching and drawing this project well before it was an official project, because the photos are so engaging. And I will show you close-ups of some of the photos later on. If people are curious to know what it's like, the challenges of drawing from a photo reference, I'll be happy to talk about that, especially if you have questions. And for the photographers among us, it's worth knowing that it's worth our talking about how the eye and the camera see very different things, and how while many painters want to paint an exact replica, it's not the goal of a painter to paint an exact replica of a photograph. The other thing I started to do fairly early on was try to figure out how I was going to get a hold of these imagined landscapes. I was, of course, we were locked down under COVID, and fortunately, everybody in my immediate circle was fine. Was worried about the nation, but I had the time to sit and contemplate and really do a deep dive into this project. As I said, I did think that I was going to be doing imagined landscapes. I was talking to Carol Cammon. Some of you know her to be the Tompkins County historian. And as I was describing this challenge, she paused and looked at me with a twinkle in her eye and said, "Would you like to know where some of the real activity took place?" So Carol Cammon, knowing everything about Ithaca, took me to these places, and we sat in the car, and she started reading from her notes, reading documentation of activity that happened at these places, which are in Lansingville, this at the corner of Jerry Smith Road. One of the things that I included from these photos was the idea of using a barn and a road as a motif and a metaphor for what the enslaved people were doing, trying to find a way, a road or no road, to safety, and often seeking some sort of shelter in a barn. The titles came to be because I was looking for inspiration to help me imagine what people were seeing, and I started looking at a book that I'll show you in a few slides that recorded information about the Underground Railroad firsthand. And it became really apparent that some of those passages should be the title for the building. So this one is called, "If one or two safe stopping places could be found along the way, such as a barn or a shed, they could walk quite safely all night. About 2 or easily 3 nights would convey them to a place of safety," them obviously being the slaves seeking freedom. That was written by William Penn in October 1854. So not only did this book that I will show you in a few moments become important, a lot of books came out in the past year, and these are some that are worth reading. Some are magical realism, obviously Ta-Nehisi Coates. The one on the top, 400 Souls, I recommend because it's a series of short essays if you don't want to, read a huge volume. Colson Whitehead's Pulitzer Prize winning book is quite well known. And then these two became very important. All of this reading took on an extra relevance because of the George Floyd murder, which happened around a year ago at the same time that I was really getting into this project. So these two, I just want to mention because the one on the left, Barracoon, is written by Zora Neale Hurston, the anthropologist. And similar to Juneteenth, it tells the story of a man named Cujo Lewis, who was a survivor of the last slave ship to cross the Atlantic. It crossed illegally, and he was enslaved 50 years after the slave trade had officially ended. So Juneteenth isn't the only time that people were kept from knowing their truth. The one on the right, the Underground Railroad records, was compiled by William Still, and he's a Philadelphia person, as am I. And this was the book that helped me add to what I was able to learn from Carol Kamen, and also give the title to most of the watercolors. These next three all have the same name. The road was paved and rugged, choreographed and improvised. These are all watercolors, and they're all 22 by 30 inches wide. And in these, I was trying to convey differences in the way the road might have been seen rather, and different kinds of environments. It's important to remember how much of the activity took place at night. This again is a photograph from the trip that Carol Kamen took me on to see the real sites. And from that, I did 2 watercolor on black watercolor paper. I will be very honest and tell you that, well, one thing I like about painting is that it's a process of learning and discovery. You figure things out, you ask questions and find answers in the process, and that's delightful. It can be pretty pretty frightening when you are doing something totally new. And painting on black watercolor was something I had to learn how to do as I was going about it. It's not self-evident what you do to make it work. But this one, which is called, oops, let me go back to the other one. The fugitive was most likely going to Cayuga County, to Auburn, where he would have found succor with Mrs. Seward, who had a warm room and a warm heart. Those are from Carol Kamen's notes. And this one, a fugitive slave spent the night with us. This is the title of the painting seen here on the easel. Seeking evidence of the barn where a fugitive spent the night in 1852, somewhere near Jerry Smith Road in Lansingville. According to Carol's notes, the year was 1852. Betsy was 25. Betsy was not the enslaved person. Betsy was 25, Betsy Barber, and she lived in the farmhouse. And she was most probably doing evening chores when she encountered a man in the barn. Carol is reading this to me as we're sitting on the corner. Saturday, January 17th, 1852, a fugitive slave spent the night with us, had company. The next day she wrote, January 18th, Sunday, attended church 3 times, gave the fugitive 25 cents. These are 2 small oils that I included in the show. Again, working from that same corner and showing what the same view might look like under different circumstances. This one called Hiding the Practice of Freedom, and this one called Spaces Akin to Freedom. Again, after the editor of the book by William Still. And in these 2, I wanted to communicate how personal and intimate and familial life was among the people seeking freedom. This one, it says, my son Augustus is the last of the family in slavery. I feel rejoiced that he is soon to be free and with me. I hope and pray you will help me as far as possible. In addition, clearly, to relying on their strength and dignity, and strength and determination and ingenuity, the path to freedom depended on the kindness of strangers as well. This one, I write to you for Mrs. Susan Bell. She left her dear little children behind. She is stopping in our city and wants to hear from her children very much indeed. She says that you were kind to her and she does not forget it. We have had 31 fugitives in the last 27 days, but you no doubt have had many more than that. Moving on to what you will see in the Cayuga Museum, I have, I guess, 11, same number in each part of the show, paintings based on family photos and of course, public domain photos of Harriet Tubman. This patriarch and matriarch being based on this photo on the left, which I completely love. And you can see that, you know, I didn't capture the fullness of what that photograph communicates. That would be my great uncle Gabriel, our mother's handwriting there at the top. And of course, a well-known photograph of Harriet Tubman on the right. There are two paintings I feel central to the show. This one on the left, I realized I didn't include the photograph because it's not a very well-known photograph of her as a young woman dressed in not a way that you're accustomed to seeing her. So that's kind of the centerpiece. And the four women on this wall, the paintings are the same height, 36, but they're 24 inches wide. And I intentionally made them look as if they were of a piece with the Harriet Tubman photo. Harriet obviously coming long before. So from our family photos, this is a woman I do not know. This would be my great aunt Ida. This would be my maternal grandmother who you saw in the earlier picture and my paternal grandmother. And what I wanted to accomplish here in my studio and after doing lots and lots of sketches, these are all the same person, right? The photograph, which I just think is striking on the left. So this is my father's mother. I'm thinking it might have been taken in the late 1800s. It's certainly staged in front of one of those photographer studio backgrounds. What I wanted to do, you know, a lot of painters, and frankly, a lot of young African-American painters, young being in their 30s and 40s, have done a lot to bring back portraiture. And in many ways, they use their own family histories, their lives, and people in their lives to communicate something, often embellishing them, making them seem like a figure out of history from a different era. And in my case, I wasn't interested in presenting them, embellishing them, or recasting them, or presenting them in any way other than what they absolutely were, giving them their environment, giving them their proper names or titles. And the only nod that I wanted to do, might have lost a little bit of it on the way as I was doing the artwork. I wanted to have each of the women in a frame. So each of the four they're in some sort of a frame defining their environment with a ground plane here. And what I wanted to do was give them the environment that they were at home in, realizing as well that it was an environment that imprisoned them. And I wanted to have, in each case, one of the feet or both of their feet sort of stepping out of the frame. This was an early sketch when I was trying to work out that idea. And as is often the case when you get going with your painting, some things fall by the wayside. So that might not be as apparent, but here you can see the same thing. I had her stepping sort of out of her loving frame, but also the frame in which she was, quote, imprisoned, not of her choice. So here I am working on my paternal grandmother's picture. Now my maternal grandmother is rendered in this picture as an older woman intentionally, a little bit bent over, but still strong. But I was, as they say, gobsmacked when I saw the picture because I could not believe her outfit. Now I knew this grandmother and I'm thinking this was probably in the 50s. And I just said, you know, if I had that bag and that hat, she was just strutting, as they say. So I intentionally rendered her to look a little older because I wanted the four women to represent different generations. And those are sketches, again, of me trying to work out the size and the scale and this idea of them stepping out of the frame. I included some scenes of just everyday life, courting, as it were, in this case, and getting close to the end. So this is the other central painting called Night Picnic here on the, up in the studio, is based on that photo. It's quite interesting to show the photo with the painting. They're different. And the responses are interesting depending on whether people are focused on telling you, well, you didn't get this right, or just being given too much information. You know, when you see the painting, you can supply information that the photograph doesn't give you. So this is my aunt, again, the only person I know in this painting. And my feeling is that they were joyful, celebrating, having a picnic. I kind of love these two people right here, sort of incredulous looks on people's faces. But again, this was also a time in Maryland and Virginia when segregation was strongly enforced. And I remember our mother saying, you know, you couldn't even stop on the road in front of the University of Maryland. I mean, the point is there were only limited places where you could enjoy yourself or have fun. And so the idea behind Night Picnic is that it's a joyful, warm event that is charged or characterized by the limitations that were put on the people who were enjoying themselves. This is a picture of my mother, and this is, the lesson here is do not let this happen to your photos. I'm not even sure I can find enough to complete that image. This is a page from a journal our mother started, I guess, shortly before she died. She died at 95 in 2008. And I guess my sister and I must have said, Mom, start writing this stuff down. But clearly I didn't know that she had, and I didn't read this until a few weeks ago. And it really moved me to tears because she is talking about her mother. I'm going to read it. It's not very long. And I could easily, my sister and I could easily be saying this about our mother. So it says, my mother, I must not forget how much my mother liked good paintings. In our living room on U Street, she had a beautiful oil painting of the Blue Ridge Mountains. In the dining room, she had two pictures by Millet, the Gleaners and the Angelus. And actually, we still have those pictures in our house, my sister and I. There was also a black and white drawing of an Arabian horseback rider in the desert. I can still see his flowing white garments. Over the sideboard was a large still life of fruit and birds. Mama always wanted flowers of some type in the house. They could be wild, or when there was no money for real flowers or no wildflowers, she would cut the green hedges and put them in the vases. It always gave an alive look to the house. So the apple didn't fall far from the tree. I want to end with a thought about what it means to be heroic. Again, conversation I had with our mom. It was, she was in her late 80s, early 90s, and we were watching Rosa Parks getting an award on TV. My mom was sitting in her comfy chair a little bit in front of me, and I was on the sofa behind her. And Rosa Parks looked beautiful in this pink gown. And as I watched it, I said, wow, she looks like she could be the same age as our mom. You know, sometimes you just think these people, they're historical, they're not still alive. And of course, at this time she was. And then it turned out that she was exactly the same age as our mom. And I started thinking about her history with the bus and whatnot. And I thought, wow, that must mean that our mom would have been asked to move to the back of the bus. And as we're watching TV, I'm sitting up like straighter and straighter. And I said, Mom, were you ever asked to move to the back of the bus? And me paraphrasing, her answer would be to say something like, duh. I mean, she didn't say that, but of course she was. And now I'm still getting straighter and straighter and coming out of the sofa. And I said, "What did you do?" And she just kind of paused and she said, "I moved to the back of the bus." And for that very quick moment, I was deflated. I said, "Oh no, our mom wasn't heroic." But as soon as I said that, like in a New York minute, I said, "Oh no, the real heroism," I mean, obviously these people are heroic, the Harriet Tubmans of the world, but the other real heroism, it's all of those men and women who got up every day and put on their clothes and went out to work and knew that they were going to be asked to move to the back of the bus. And they would gather all their dignity and do all those sort of secret signs, smiles, not smiles, that you do when you have to swallow what you're really thinking and wanting to say, and move to the back of the bus. So on that note, I would like to thank, of course, everybody at the venues in Auburn. Do everything you can to get up there. They're a delight to work with, and I'm not being paid to say that. I'd like to mention Lorraine Arsenault, who's a poet that I met recently, who has written about my work and she's an ekphrastic poet and will do so again, I hope. Carol Cameron, obviously. Sue Perlgut and Jack Reynolds are the videographers who did the promo, and they're doing a small video for me. And of course, my friends and family, you know who you are, and those who came before us, shout out, as they say. What's next for me? That would be moi, sketching and walking off into the wilderness with my sketchbook. That's it for me. I'll hand it back over to anybody else, Davana, and be happy if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Terry. No one typed any questions into the chat, but does anyone have any questions for Terry? If you do, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask.
For all the people like me who don't like to type in that chat box.
I have a question. Terry, have you traveled throughout the South at all?
Not at all yet. And I'm very well aware, of those Eventbrite programs that are on TV about history. I sort of watched all of them, tracing the routes from the South to the North. And, when I said what's next, there's so much in this project that I can mine and explore. I'll be happy to take suggestions if you have any. If you know the South, I don't know the South at all. And I'm sure I'd be surprised at things I might learn at my own presumptions, probably. Do you have any, Dee, suggestions, ideas?
No, not specifically that I can think of. I mean, my brother and sister-in-law and their son and his wife and their kids all live in Georgia, in Atlanta. And they also have a farmhouse up in the northwest corner of Georgia, and where they have a huge garden. And so we go and visit every year to plant the garden with them. And it just feels so different in the South, especially now.
I think Davana's from Louisiana, did you say? Yeah, Davana's from Louisiana.
So I was just curious to know if you have a desire to explore the landscape in the same way that you are here, or if you
I do. I've never been 100% comfortable traveling in this country. I'm more comfortable traveling in other countries, but for those of you who don't know, our neighbor Teresa Grady, who lives across the street, has been doing work turns out that she was doing work for her sister's legal case in the same town where Ahmaud Arbery died. She became close to their family, and she has shown pictures, and she's actually written some poems, and she desperately wants me to go with her, and I would definitely do that. I would go sketchbook in hand to see, what the next step is.
Anybody else with questions?
I see people there who have done artwork on family photos and other things. Some people in New York City who are being very quiet and very well behaved, not asking me mischievous questions. Thank you very much. I see you. Hi,
Terry.
Diana.
I don't have a question, but I just want to say, Terry, there's no questions because you have been so utterly complete in your talk, and the wealth of information is just astonishing, and it takes a while to just absorb it all. It's just so awesome, and you just have done such a tremendous job of turning it all into art and then turning it back all into history.
Thank you, Diana. It kind of works, if you like a lot of things, reading and history, and I mean, for whatever you do, frankly, you could use your medium, quilting, poetry, to approach something like that. And I must say, although I have focused on my own history, I would very much like to, as best I can, do something similar with other people's histories. I mean, I feel embarrassed about how little I know about Native American, the range of Native American traditions and histories in detail, indigenous peoples. I have actually thought about switching photos with someone of a different background, and in which case I would do work based on that person's photos and they would do work based on mine. It could be a little fraught because you might not like where they take it, but and even I've talked a little bit about this as well, the idea of doing something collaborative in a way that helps you, you can explore your own art form, but you can also get to learn the other person's, life, and maybe see yours in a different light.
I just want to say, the paintings where you used the black paper,
Yeah.
I just want to say that those paintings have stuck with me over these days since seeing them, because I feel like you really gave me the sense of people traveling at night, and just how scary that would have been, even you have a leader who knows what she's doing, but it was just, it was like I had a very visceral reaction to it, especially in contrast to seeing the maybe something similar in the daylight,
in the daytime.
And the trust and the bravery and the scariness of it all, was just very vivid to me in those two paintings.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. You never know if you're going to pull off what you intend to do. And I meant to say, I thought about it even when you mentioned the paintings. I don't have any very small versions of this work. I would like to do that next, but I did get cards made, note cards, and through the kindness of both the Schweinfurth and the Cayuga Museum and myself, I guess, the cards are going to be for sale up at in Auburn, and the proceeds are going to go towards giving kids money, scholarships to attend their. Auburn has a whole range of wonderful summer classes for kids, some quilting, some painting, some African traditions and whatnot. So if you do get up there and want to bring a little small version of one of the paintings home with you, just know that you'll be supporting somebody's child in a summer art class, the kind that we all remember when we started out, I guess.
Yeah, also, I wanted to say that the images on the screen of those dark paintings, they look much brighter seeing them on the screen than they actually are. There's really a richness to that black and dark colors in the museum that you really need to see in person.
Yeah, the glass kind of it makes it hard to capture, especially in photograph. There's also a virtual tour on the website now, which I thought was quite nice.
Terry, I have a question. For those of you who haven't been out to see the exhibit or aren't familiar with the two spaces, the Schweinfurth part of the exhibit, we're a typical gallery, kind of white walls, and the work sort of reads the way things would in a typical gallery. But the work in the Cayuga, it transforms in the location. You have some of these smaller paintings on, some furniture where it's displayed, and one of them is over the fireplace, and when you were creating these, were you thinking about how they fit in with that historic location, and what were your thoughts on putting them in that home?
Most definitely, you know, as you have said, the call required people to justify doing the work in 2 different locations. And as soon as I saw the inside, I said, well, it's perfect. I have some other pieces that I didn't quite finish with the round old wooden frames with the curved glass, and one that Eva gave me that I haven't quite finished yet. And so that it you know, sometimes the stars align, and in this case, what you were asking for, it fell right into place. What I could do fell right into place with that, including the idea of the watercolors and the white box setting of the Schweinfurth, the Julius Gallery at Schweinfurth. Yeah, it was all completely of a piece.
Do you recommend going to one before the other? If I go to Auburn tomorrow, where should I start?
I can only say give yourself time, because it depends on how long you like to look at work, but the work in both of my installations is relatively small. You could spend a lot of time looking, but you should not miss the other exhibitions. I took the little tour of the sound on film, and it's fascinating. You know how we all live in upstate New York and there's 1 or 2 little things. It's like, it's not New York City, but there's stuff that you can really take in. So that tour, I had to cut it short. It's fascinating. And you should also see the front of the barn that's pink and orange. But then in Schweinfurth, Made in New York is on exhibit, and that's huge.
All right.
And the work is excellent. And then upstairs there are the quilts. So I guess I'm inclined to say start in Cayuga and see the people and do the other tours, and then go into Schweinfurth. But there's no reason why it couldn't be done otherwise. Just give yourself plenty of time.
Terry?
Yes, hi Whitfield. These are these 2 guys who are my mischievous friends who've been quiet down there in New York City.
No, I'm not.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, I mean, I've known you for about 40 years now, and you and I traveled in Africa for a bit, and I know that you've been a world traveler, and myself being an African American, I went to South Carolina and Georgia with my family, my mother's family, every year as a kid. And since you're such a world traveler and an adventurous person, I'm curious about when you said that you're not as comfortable traveling around the United States. And I mean, personally, I feel somewhat haunted as an adult when I go to the South by history there. And I just was wondering what you have to say about that statement that you made, that you feel, you know, like more comfortable traveling like in Europe or Africa than in the US.
Well, Whitty, I must say lately, parts of Europe are kind of bad too for people like us, but I clearly remember, I came back. Yeah, I remember hearing what our parents said about things that they had to go through. And although, you know, the one thing I love about our parents and, you know, the people I know, Fred and Whitfield, I'm talking to you and others, given what they went through, the things that make me angrier than if I had to go through it myself, I'm so proud of them for raising us not to hate people. And they might have done a better job giving us some of the details of things that I had to learn as an adult about what they went through, but I can clearly understand that this is my feeling, that whether it's Japanese people who were interned or you named the group of people that had some hardship brought on to them, Holocaust survivors. I'm thinking three things. The people, parents, my parents, they feel that it's behind them. It's not important. It's behind them. They want us to do well and not focus on that. But I also think that most of the time they probably had to be not just angry, but scared to death, because even if you're like a radical protester, you're a little bit afraid of what's going to happen physically or otherwise if you go far afield of the law. And I'm thinking they probably had a hard time admitting that to each other. And so I can certainly see why they wouldn't want to admit that to their children. I think it's easier for grandparents to talk to grandchildren. I've had that experience, or for parents to talk to somebody who's not their child about it. I also think, Whitty, that the reason it's easier for me to be comfortable in France, for example, once people realize I'm not from one of the former French colonies, I say that because my accent is really good. It's not that my French is flawless, but my accent is good. And so people often assume until I tell them that they assume I'm from the Caribbean. And when they think I'm from the Caribbean, they are, as French people are, very proper and very polite and like distant as all get out. And then when you say, no, I'm African-American, you become very hip and cool and exotic, and they love you. And the problem is that they don't know how to confront people in their own history. So the Algerians for the French, whoever it is that you have your history of shame and guilt with, you can't confront it with your own people, but you can easily embrace someone else. So, and the same thing happens in reverse. You know, I've had African friends here who, as they say, forgive me, everybody, I hope I'm not making you feel uncomfortable with my language. They're treated like, quote, garden variety Negroes, as we like to say in the old days, until someone might realize, oh, you're not African-American, you're African, you're Ghanaian, you're this, you're that. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, and we love you and tell us more. So I think people have trouble confronting whatever it is in their own history, shame or guilt, neither of which are necessary emotions because it's part of our history. But I think there's a discomfort on the side of the non-minority, non-person of color. And then frankly, the other thing is just being afraid that somebody's going to assume you're there for no good reason and, you know, shoot first, ask questions later. So, you know, that's rough, but that's the way it is. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, in Ithaca, we're pretty good. I don't know. Does that make sense, Whitty? Did you have that feeling?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, the work is wonderful, and I think that the richness of it is sort of comes out of a lot of pain and a lot of struggle, but it's the material that we live with, and it's like the essence that we share. And so I just wanted to say that, I mean, I think that you've done a wonderful job at bringing out that history, and I really like the way you talk about it and your attitude toward it.
Anyone have any this is the last call before we wrap it up.
I have a question for Devana and Cynthia. I'm planning on coming up to see the exhibit, and I went online, of course, to find out what the status of COVID precautions are. But it seems like, well, on the website, it said that the Cayuga Museum was still taking reservations ahead of time. Is that true?
Yeah, so we can take reservations, but we're also not requiring it anymore. So
okay.
You just come, we're open from 11 to 4, Wednesday through Saturday.
Okay, and then Devana, is Schweinfurth similarly open?
We are open. We are not taking reservations and they're not required. We're open Wednesday through Saturday from 10 till 5 and Sundays from 1 to 5. And
Great.
we are, masks are encouraged for vaccinated individuals, but not required. And for unvaccinated individuals, masks are required. But, yeah.
Same with us.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Terry, so much. You gave a wonderful lecture, and we hope that you guys will make it out to see the exhibits. If you cannot, there are virtual exhibits, and there will be some more videos to be shared that's forthcoming from Terry Plater. And you can check out her website as well if you want to keep track of her and keep tabs on what she's doing next. And thank you guys all so much for joining us, and I hope you have a good night.
Needless to say, my heartfelt thanks to everybody, staff, and everybody I'm seeing on the screen. I also appreciate everyone who's listening and talking. I mean, it says something, how do I say this without sounding totally corny? It says something for people to be able to talk about their experience, especially parts that, for example, I might not have shared with most of you on the screen. It says something about you that there's quite a comfort level talking about this, because believe me, we don't often share, this part of an experience without knowing that we're in a overused word, safe space, So I don't know if it's Devana and Kirsten and these guys pull together a good group of people or what, but it's something I'm grateful for. Thank you.